As we're approaching the first anniversary of PlayStation 5, let's travel back to 25 years ago. The original PlayStation was just getting off the ground, signifying Sony's first foray into console gaming. The company had a lot going for it, showing off the effectiveness of disc-based media, while Nintendo continued to move forward with game cartridges. Still, PlayStation was facing an uphill battle against Nintendo's tried-and-true franchises and Sega's own disc-based Saturn console. The PlayStation had the technology to make a lot of noise in the gaming world, but it needed something big to compete with the Nintendos and Segas of the world. Sony needed a mascot. Today, PlayStation has a parade of recognizable first-party characters, enough to fill a first-party fighting game. However, some may be surprised to find out the original PlayStation pitchman wasn't anyone on the current first-party roster. It was, in fact, Crash Bandicoot. Hey folks, if you enjoy this video feature, be sure to hit that like, subscribe, notification button. It's 3 small clicks for you but means the world to us. Let's get started. Earlier this year, we talked about the best video game commercials and TV ad campaigns of all time. And yes, we discussed Crash Bandicoot, who originally pushed his self-titled debut and the power of the first PlayStation.
Boy, the Bandicoot will come. I'm coming to get you, pal. Hi, how are you? Am I on the right street? Can you tell me where Nintendo is? People run a lot here. This is really nice. Plumber boy, your time has come.
For the unfamiliar, the commercial centered around a person dressed in a giant Crash Bandicoot suit. He would take part in various exploits, like hollering at random people outside of their windows at unholy hours of the night, invading local Pizza Huts, and driving up to Nintendo headquarters to call Mario out himself.
Hey, plumber boy, mustache man, your worst nightmare has arrived. Pack up your stuff. I got a little surprise for you here. Check it out.
Crash was positioned as the face of PlayStation. After months of hype, his game was set to launch on the 1-year anniversary of Sony's console. And indeed, it proved to be one of the new PlayStation's biggest hits. Before The Last of Us, before Uncharted, and even before Jak and Daxter, Naughty Dog gave birth to Crash Bandicoot. The studio's founders, Andy Gavin and Jason Rubin, had taken notice of gaming's shift into 3D environments. While racing games, brawlers, and shooters had shifted into 3D, Gavin and Rubin wanted to take on a new challenge and do the same for platformers. While Mario and Sonic had made a career of going horizontally, Crash Bandicoot would go in a completely different direction. Literally, he would go straight ahead with players looking primarily at his back. It's what the creators jokingly coined Sonic's ass game. Here's the story from Gavin himself. Sensing opportunity, we turn to our own favorite genre, the character platform action game. CAG for short. In the 80s and early 90s, the bestsellers of home systems were dominated by CAGs and their cousins, like Walk to the Right and Punch, or Walk to the Right and Shoot. Top examples were Mario, Sonic, and our personal favorite Donkey Kong Country. So on the second day of the drive, passing Chicago and traveling through America's long flat heartland, fed at McDonald's, and accompanied by a gassy Labrador Ridgeback mix, also fed at McDonald's, the idea came to us. We called it the Sonic's Ass Game, and it was born from the question, what would a 3D CAG be like? Well, we thought you'd spend a lot of time looking at Sonic's ass. Aside from the difficulties of identifying with a character only viewed in posterior, it seemed cool. But we were worried about the camera, dizziness, and the player's ability to judge depth. More on that later. Crash would basically move in a straight line throughout the first game, but his direction would vary. He could go straight ahead, he could go traditional left and right, or he could even come from the background and come straight at the player, which Gavin notes is reminiscent of the boulder scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark. Rubin heralded these 3 stage types as the ideal solution to presenting Crash in a unique way never before seen in games. The Sonic's Ass nomenclature was more than a casual reference to the blue mascot turned 90 degrees into the screen. It defined the key problem in moving a 2D game into the third dimension. You would always be looking at the character's ass. This might play well, had it never been tried, but it certainly would not be the best way to present a character. Our solution, which evolved over the next 2 years, was multifold. First, the character would start the game facing the screen. More on that later. Second, there would be 2D levels that guaranteed quality of gameplay, and a chance to see the character in a familiar pose, allowing comparisons against old 2D games. And third, we would attempt the reverse of the Sonic-ass level and run into the screen, which became the legendary boulder levels. Outside the boulder levels, Naughty Dog wanted to inject something new into the typical platformer formula. As great as Mario and Sonic were, those games had a fair amount of downtime in between baddie bashing. That's when the Crash creators had an idea. On the surface, Crash was a standard platformer, but what to do in between taking down enemies? Naughty Dog struggled with this idea, but eventually came up with an elegant solution. We turned to Gavin to explain. On Saturday, January 1996, while Jason and I were driving to work, we worked 7 days a week, approximately 10 a.m. to 4 a.m. No one said making video games was easy. We knew we needed something else, and we knew it had to be low polygon, and ideally, multiple types of them could be combined to interesting effect. We'd been thinking about the objects in various puzzle games. So crates. How much lower poly could you get? Crates can hold stuff, they could explode, they could bounce or drop, they could stack. They could be used as switches to trigger other things. Perfect. So that Saturday, we scrapped together whatever else we had planned to do, and I coded the crates while Jason modeled a few, an explosion, and drew some quick textures. About 6 hours later, we had the basic palette of Crash 1 crates going. Normal, life crate, random crate, continue crate, bouncy crate, TNT crate, invisible crate, switch crate. The stacking logic let them fall down on each other or even bounce on each other. They were awesome, and smashing them was so much fun. While Mario had coins, Sonic had rings, Crash now had crates. Crates went on to become one of the defining characteristics of the Crash Bandicoot series. The idea of breaking boxes was simple enough for casual players, engaging enough for children, especially with their wacky sound effects, and enough of a challenge for hardcore players. Crash Bandicoot crates also opened up game design in some big ways. Crates could contain health, extra lives, and even open the door to bonus levels. They also ensured that there was never really a dull moment in the first Crash game, because any lack of enemy encounters would be balanced by the need to search for more crates. With the Crash gameplay formula figured out, the next step was to create an adversary, because a hero is only as good as his nemesis. Naughty Dog needed a villain.
But Dr. Cortex, we have not determined the cause of past failures. Moron! This Bandicoot will be my general, and he will lead my Cortex commandos to world domination. This time I shall reign triumphant!
To get into the creation of Dr. Neo Cortex, one first needs to examine the origins of Crash. Gavin explained that the goal was to tap into an animal that few people knew about, similar to what Warner Brothers had done with the Tasmanian Devil. With that in mind, he and Ruben took a page out of the same book, almost literally. After browsing through a copy of Tasmanian Mammals, the two originally opted for a wombat. Crash Bandicoot originally started life as Willy the Wombat, but eventually changing Willy to Crash and a wombat to a Bandicoot, Gavin and Ruben started thinking about a nemesis, at which point the ideas flowed much quicker. Here's how Gavin recounts the story. I remember it clearly. The four of us were eating at this mediocre Italian near Universal, and I had this idea of an evil genius villain with a big head. Obviously, brainy cartoon villains have big heads. He was all about his attitude and his minions. Video games need lots of minions. Jason had become very fond of Pinky and the Brain, and we imagined a more malevolent brain, with minions like weasels and Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
All right, you mugs, fall out!
Did you find the rabbit?
Don't worry, Judge. We got the formants all over the city. We'll find them.
A villain, all full of himself, unable to conceive of ever doing anything the simple way, but constantly, in his eyes, betrayed by the incompetence of his henchmen. I put on my silly villain voice and intoned, "If you had 3 neurons between you, you couldn't make a triangle." With this attitude, His name, Dr. Neo Cortex, popped instantly into our heads.
Done, Crash Bandicoot.
After conceiving Cortex, the Crash creators were able to flesh out the Bandicoot's world further from there. They were able to come up with an evil genius island stronghold, create evil minions, and construct unique environments with their own themes and landmarks. The final result was one of the first platformers of its kind and a big hit for PlayStation. Crash would keep its hits coming for 2 more games, at which point Naughty Dog was ready to move on to new adventures. The influence of the first Crash Bandicoot game was undeniable, but the lovable mascot didn't have the staying power that one would have expected based on his original ad campaign. While Mario and Sonic endured, Crash was lost for many years and fell off Sony's radar, to the point that the character was ultimately sold to Activision. At first, it appeared that Activision wasn't sure what to do with Crash either. However, in 2017, the publisher got to work at bringing back the character's classic games, including the 1996 original. Activision announced the Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy Remastered Collection, and developer Vicarious Visions recognized the vintage gems they had been handed. Crash Bandicoot has remained so popular because he's fun to play as, game director Dan Tangway said in 2017. There's always a surprise around the corner as you're playing with Crash, and for me, it's as if he's kind of a living cartoon character. Activision leaned into the latter part of the idea for Crash, using modern technology to emphasize Crash's wacky mannerisms and cartoonish behaviors. The Insane Trilogy drew in old and new Crash Bandicoot fans in such numbers that Activision got to work at its first all-new Crash Bandicoot game in 2 decades. Crash Bandicoot has grown in a lot of ways since his debut 25 years ago today, and while he was inactive for a long stretch, he now appears to be back and better than ever, thanks to developers like Vicarious Visions and Toys for Bob, who grew up on Naughty Dog's Maniac Marsupial. On this day 25 years ago, Crash Bandicoot declared that he was coming for Nintendo's Plumber Boy. However, Nintendo was prepared for this new challenger. But that's a story for another day. Hey folks, if you enjoyed this feature, make sure to hit that like, subscribe, notification button. It's 3 small clicks for you, but means the world to us. For more video features and everything else gamer related, you're already in the right place. You're on Shacknews.com.